Let's do it. How is everyone? Oh man, I started with the wrong background. You guys, I can't do that to you. Gotta give you, gotta give you the moving background. There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. That was a weird start. All right. Today we're going to get into why did Israel lie? It's a good question, right? Israel's been caught lying over and over and over about just about everything that happened October 7th. But October 7th still happened. There was still, like, Hamas still broke through, stole a bunch of people's, a lot of hostages, and there was a lot of killing back and forth. And so, why did Israel feel the need to create this bizarre fantasy of what went down October 7th? We're going to get into that. I'm going to get into so many more updates about Israel's Super Bowl ads that they put forward, endorsing and justifying their genocide. I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into also some more stuff about Ukraine, including the fact that apparently the U.S. is making a lot of Russian missiles. That is something else that I feel like we should know, that I feel like sounds pretty important. So I'm going to be getting into all of that, but I want to start off with just showing you one of the biggest genocide endorsers, Hillary Clinton, one of the biggest war criminals we've got, proudest, biggest, brightest war criminals we've had here in the United States. Hillary Clinton getting confronted, just bold-faced confronted in public, because honestly, like, that type of clip is A, more important than 90% of what they're giving you on your mainstream media, and B, more interesting, and C, did I mention more important? So let's start off with that. Let's just dive into that. Why not? Because I know, because you should want to see this. This is what we should all be doing, and this is what should happen anytime one of these people walks out in public in any way.
War criminals, the people of Libya, the people of Iraq, the people of Syria, the people of Yemen, and the people now of Palestine, as well as the people of America, will never forgive me. I receive a genuine theological seminary.
I'm asking you to leave the delegate will now escort you out of the building.
You will burn!
Can you? Sir.
Free! Free Palestine! 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 War criminal.
And I love Hillary's just like, okay, and let's just continue. Where were we before the man reminded you all that I should burn in hell for being a war criminal? What was I saying just before that young man called out everything I've done in my life and supported all of the atrocities that I have been behind as part and parcel to the U.S. empire? Where was I? What were we discussing before that? Anyway, I always like to highlight those things because that is how these people should be treated when they're giving speeches. They should simply be reminded of the people they've murdered, the people they've killed, the people they've supported the killing of over and over again. And many of those we're going to be talking about on this upcoming hour. By the way, during this hour 10 or whatever I end up doing, I will be addressing or reading any super chats over $5 or at $5 above. So if you want to support the show, that's one way to do it. So just letting you know. I might not be able to do it right away, but I will address it eventually. But yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for being here. And like I said, for those of you joining a little late, we're going to get into why Israel saw the need to lie and continues to see the need to lie about October 7th so much. But let's start off in a related topic, Israel's Super Bowl ads. And actually, this does have to do with their lies. Israel put up Super Bowl ads costing millions and millions of dollars to sell their genocide narrative it says to the American. This is how little. This is an Arab newspaper, and it shows how little they know about the United States. The fact that they said American football audience. The Super Bowl is just watched by everybody. Like 90% of the time that I'm in a room and the Super Bowl is playing, 60% of the people there have never watched a football game in their life. So these people think that only the football audience watches the football games. Anyway, They ran a series of 30-second ads. The estimate, where is it? Oh, yeah, here. The estimate of the cost is likely $7 million for a 30-second space, and they ran several. So we're talking, 14, $20 million to run these ads. But it's kind of fascinating. The slogan of the ad was about Israeli dads, and it was titled "Bring Our Dads Home." And so it was about bringing dads home. Those were the ads. And at the exact same time that was going, somehow, perfect timing, what are the odds? Israel freed two of the hostages, both men, both dads, and it seems like odd timing, right? And then they celebrated. They said, "We did it. We freed the dads. We freed two dads," as the dads advertisement was running. Well, here might be this is how that ended up happening. How that timing ended up so good. Well, according to Al Jazeera, Israel freeing two captives was a marketing ploy for a defeated army. Let's see. Says this comes to light. This comes in the light of defeats and resistance of the Israeli army faces that the Israeli army faces in ongoing fighting. It is an attempt to boost the army's low morale in light of its failure to achieve any of its goals. As we wait for the official account from the resistance, this was a Hamas statement, so they call it the resistance. We point to news reports that indicate the two captives were not in Hamas's custody, but rather held with. So this is not a Hamas statement, but rather held with a civilian family, which casts doubt on the credibility of Israel's account and confirms its effort to exaggerate the incident. So apparently these two people who were freed were with a civilian family, which was how Israel was able to get them and free them so easily. They were simply in a civilian house. It also is how Israel was able to time it perfectly with the Bring Our Dads Home advertising campaign, which is, it's so bizarre and horrific at the same time. The idea that Israel was timing the freeing of these hostages, whether legit or not, with an advertising campaign on during the Super Bowl is just like mind-blowing. I also think another reason that they made the ads, like if Israel were to do ads saying you need to support their genocide, you would expect those ads to be, look at all these children that were taken hostage, look at these, women, and instead it focuses specifically on dads. And I think part of the reason for that, other than it fit with this apparently timing that they had planned, but the other reason for that is because they knew they were going to the other reason for that is that Israel knew they were going to free these two men, and they needed that to look like a bigger deal, I guess, than they thought it would. And so they put together this Free the Dads campaign. I also think another reason that they made it Free the Dads is because Israel does not, the far right wing psychopathic government of Israel does not want to sign the ceasefire agreement that Hamas has put forward. And one of the first steps of the ceasefire agreement is free the women and children of both sides. So Israel has 10,000, roughly 8 to 10,000 hostages in their prisons, that almost all of which did not receive a fair trial of any kind. And so, and many of them have received no trial of any kind, and many of them received a ridiculous rigged trial. But so they have 10,000 hostages. Many of them are women and children. And so one of the first steps of the proposed ceasefire that has not been approved by Israel, that Israel has walked out on, said free the women and children. And Israel is not signing on to that. And so I think maybe that might be another reason that they're focusing on the dads, is like, no, we're not going to free the women and children because we want the dads home. I don't know. It's tough it's a very weird marketing campaign. I will say that. Thank you, Bill, for the donation. Anyway, so that goes. So there's another lie, right? That apparently these captives were with a civilian family. They were not being held in the tunnels. The heavily armed Hamas areas. So it brings into question these serious questions as to why Israel keeps lying at each step of this. Now, I am not going to. I'll mention a few of them here right now, but I'm not going to go through all of the lies about October 7th because I have been debunking them as we've gone over the past 4 months, over 4 months that Israel's been committing this genocide. And by the way, to give you a little today update, they are now bombing Rafah, where they told everybody to go, and it's just horrific. What's going on there is, by all accounts, just horrifying, and they told everyone to go there. They basically said this is the safe area, right? And they keep doing that. This is the third or fourth time they've done that. The last one was Khan Yunis. They say, oh, go here and you'll be safe. That's not the area we're bombing. And then they bomb that area. They attack that area. So this is, like I said, fourth or fifth time Israel has done this, told people to go and get into more and more condensed area so that Israel can apparently have an easier time bombing these innocent people. 70% of them women and children. So anyway, it's happening again this time with Rafah, and it's horrific. And we're over 28,000 dead, although that is an understatement, because we know that there are 8 or 10,000 that are missing, and almost all of them, or the vast majority, are under rubble. So really, 28,000 is an understatement of how many have died. We know it's over 100,000 are either dead, wounded, or missing. And of that, tens of thousands who are wounded, Israel has done their best to destroy the hospital systems, which I'll mention more about that in a few minutes. Destroy the hospital systems so that these people cannot recover from their woundings, from their various harms, and from disease as well. So to get back to the lies, okay, we've seen an immense long list of lies. We know they lied about the number of dead, right? We know that I'm talking October 7th now. On October 7th and the following 2 days, we know initially they said 1,400, then they brought it down to 1,200 because many of the burnt bodies were actually the hostage takers, Hamas. But once they brought it down to 1,200, we know that a lot of those are not civilians. A lot of those were IDF or were so-called civilians, but actually were military veterans pointing guns and shooting, which I think at that point you are in the military. If you're a military veteran running around shooting with a gun, I wouldn't call that just a civilian, but you can argue about these terms if you want to. But the point is that's one of the big lies, is the number of dead. We know they lied about how many of these people died, right? We know that there were lies about the cutting a woman who was pregnant open and killing the fetus. That's been proven completely false. The only pregnant woman who died on that day was pregnant and died in the crossfire. Same with the babies. We heard stories about babies being hung from laundry lines. We heard stories about babies being put in ovens. We heard stories about babies being beheaded. All of this has proven to be completely debunked, even retracted by the White House, of all places. Despite all the propaganda they put out, they even had to retract Biden's statement that the babies were beheaded. The truth is, one baby was killed on October 7th. It's all horrific. I mean, I'm not saying one baby is fine, but it's all horrific. But one baby was killed on October 7th. And again, it was in the crossfire between, I assume, IDF and Hamas. But all of these are like crazy lies. We also know that the lie of the mass rape. Now, again, I'm not saying information or proof couldn't come up at some point that there was a rape or that there was rape, but nothing they've proven so far has shown any of that. Israel themselves has said they've had trouble finding witnesses to any of this. So, and the rape story, one of the biggest rape stories, was put together by a New York Times journalist, and he has been completely delegitimized. The New York Times put forward what one would kind of call a retraction, but they didn't call it a retraction. They basically said it's not quite. We're like researching this, or I don't remember how they phrased it, but it was clear the New York Times had concerns about that story after it came out. Thank you, duly noted, for the donation. Beelzebub said it's devastating what he's doing. Only time the Prince of Lies told the truth. It's Beelzebub. BB Beelzebub. Oh, Netanyahu. Got it. Boy, you guys and your nicknames, man. Some of the names, I'm always Like, who's Nutty Yahoo? Oh, Netanyahu. Got it. I got it. I see what you did there. I never can get your nickname. I don't know. It's just I guess I'm not in the frame of mind for the silly nicknames. I'm always like, who would Yahoo what? Anyway, and we know, yeah, I already covered how they said they're all civilians, and we now know that many of them are not civilians. We also know that they lied about all the burnt people were burned to death by Hamas, when we now know that many of the bodies in the burned buildings were Hamas, meaning they were burned by other things, such as the tank rounds that were fired at these buildings. So it's just lie after lie after lie after lie by Israel of what went down that day. And so it raises this big question. Then there's the Nova Music Festival. Many of the people that said they were at the Nova Music Festival, where the most killing of any location, that was the most killing, 300 some people, I believe, were killed. And that may be both sides. I'm not sure how that number parses out. But were killed that day. And we now know that many of the people who said they were witnesses at that festival, they actually were not there, and they accepted money to say they were witnesses at that festival. We also know that the exits were closed off by Israeli police to stop people from leaving. That's been put forward in the police report, as also witnesses have said that. So again, we see lie after lie after lie on what happened on October 7th, and it's this giant question as to why lie? Why? Because what happened on that day is horrific enough, right? Hamas did break out of their open air prison, which, Israel would call that a crime, that they broke out of the prison they had put them in. But they broke out, and we know that, yes, they did kill people, especially people coming at them with guns. We know their goal was to take hostages. We know they took hostages, and we know that people got killed in the crossfire when the IDF arrived. All of this, and obviously there's hostages right now in Gaza. All of this is horrific enough. Why did the Israeli government, along with members of the IDF, members of the public, etc., feel the need to make up all of these totally ridiculous, heinous stories of baby beheadings and crap? Why didn't they just go with the reality? And I believe, and yes, some of this is theory. I don't know that this can ever quite be proven, unless Netanyahu comes up himself and says why. But I believe that it's because Israel has been committing this genocide for years and years, right? It's been slow motion for years and years. And they've been looking to speed it up. They always look for an excuse to speed up their genocidal ethnic cleansing that they've been doing in Gaza and the West Bank. And they're looking for a reason to speed it up. And I think they knew that it wouldn't just take hostages to get the world to endorse full-on genocide, tens of thousands of bombs raining down on children. It wouldn't, like, taking hostages isn't enough to get people behind that. And they decided the only way to achieve that was stories of baby beheadings and crap like that. And that decision must have been made throughout at various levels, because people don't just take it upon themselves. Like, if you witness something horrible, if you witness an IDF fight that killed multiple people, you don't just go, you know what? I'm going to add some icing on the cake, throw a couple baby beheadings in there. Like that, I feel like that's got to come from a higher place. And we know that, so this is no longer me theorizing. This is New York Times, the neoliberal pro-Israel outlet, New York Times, says Israel knew Hamas's attack plan more than a year ago. More than a year in advance. A blueprint reviewed by the Times laid out the attack in detail. Not just a vague, not even like with 9/11, the bin Laden determined to attack within the U.S. This is in detail plans. And, the New York Times tries to write it off as like, oh, too bad Israel didn't take it seriously. Man, if they had just taken it seriously. Trust me, Israel, one of the largest militaries in the world, one of the most surveilled places in the world, they didn't just shrug off this plan. That's ridiculous. Anyway, and so I believe you put together all the evidence, and it's quite clear that Israel knew and allowed something to happen. Now, They might not have thought all of this was going to happen. They might have thought it would be different, but they knew they had the Hannibal Directive. They knew that if and when this happened, they were going to kill everyone, including the hostages and the people taking the hostages and the innocent civilians around. For those of you who are maybe new to my stuff and don't know about the Hannibal Directive, the Israeli government and military has a directive that if someone is taken hostage, the game plan is kill the hostage takers, and kill anyone nearby. Literally just turn the area into a parking lot is the goal if a hostage is taken. And so that's what they were operating under on October 7th. Kill everyone. That's quite clear. But you add that, the idea that their plan is to kill everyone, and with the fact that they knew this Hamas's plan a year in advance, then that means they knew a lot of this was going to play out. They knew Hamas was going to come in. They knew they were going to take hostages, and Israel knows that their game plan at that point is kill everyone. The New York Times says the approximately 40-page document, which the Israeli authorities codenamed Jericho Wall, outlined point by point exactly the kind of devastating invasion that led to the deaths of about 1,200 people. Hamas followed the blueprint with shocking precision. The document called for a barrage of rockets at the outset of the attack, drones to knock out the security cameras, and automated machine guns along the border, and gunmen to pour into Israel in mass, in paragliders, on motorcycles, and on foot, all of which happened on October 7th. Israel knew everything that was going to happen, and they knew what their game plan would be if it did happen. And so the lies are clearly because Israel knew they could not get people to support this genocide without adding in ridiculous stories. They've been doing a slow motion genocide in Gaza and the West Bank against Palestinians for years and years. And in fact, it was no secret, right? Here's from Vox, a liberal outlet. And this is from, I believe, 2014. So this is not new. They say Israel has developed a new version of its long-held threat management strategy, which is often called mowing the grass. It's a pretty creepy term, as it implies that periodically killing people is the same as keeping your lawn groomed. Because these are genocidal people. These are people that want the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And so they're mowing the grass, mowing the lawn, whatever they called it, is them murdering Palestinians to try and keep the Palestinian population down and to try to stop, generally they'd go after people like journalists, academics, leaders, to basically take away those who lead a community, those who lead a society, those who make sure a society can grow and thrive. Obviously, the hospitals are important in that regard. So this is something Israel's been doing long term, but they they wanted to speed it up. They wanted to speed up this genocide, and everything is pointing to the fact that they knew this was going to happen, and they knew that apparently the truth of October 7th was not good enough to justify a genocide. And they decided they had to create all this garbage about beheaded babies. Here's from 24 years ago. Sorry. 24 years ago, the Israeli government report admits systematic torture of Palestinians. Systematic torture of Palestinians from 24 years ago. This is The Guardian. So this is nothing new. This is Israel's long-term plan. They've just sped it up. They've added steroids. Thank you, Omar, for the donation. According to a JHU study, 97.5% of Israeli Judaics have no Semitic DNA and no ancestral claim to the land. 80% of Palestinians are actual Semites. Yeah, I mean, that speaks to why the term anti-Semitic is dumb, because Palestinians are Semites as well. I don't like to get into the DNA thing, but you are correct that, and I think one of the better books written on this, although I haven't read it, so I don't know if I can tout it, but is inventing Israel. No, or inventing Israel, or inventing the Jewish people. Can't remember. Anyway, but the DNA thing, I think, to me, matters less than how you were born culturally, what you are in terms of Judaism. Now, in terms of land, I think that claiming you come from anywhere thousands of years ago is just dumb. But this is not thousands of years ago we're talking about. This is Jewish people that moved into. And by the way, for those of you new to my show, I am Jewish, but guess what? Jews can be anti-Zionist. Yay! Jews can be against an apartheid state. Jews can be against genocide. Did you know that? Yeah, it's a thing. It's a real thing. There are millions of us around the world. And in fact, there are more Christian Zionists in America than there are Jews in the world. Fun fact, look it up. But anyway, I was talking about thousands of years ago. This is not thousands of years ago. This is Jewish people going into that area of the world and kicking people off their land, ethnic cleansing, murdering roughly 700,000 people, destroying their villages, destroying their land, their culture, and pushing them into refugee camps and open air prisons. And now we're seeing bombing the living hell out of open air prisons. But despite all of these lies, many of them have been debunked by independent media. Some of the debunkings have actually made it to mainstream media. I don't even think MSNBC is still touting beheaded babies. Maybe they are. I know Bill Maher still is. I did a takedown of Bill Maher's garbage you can find on my YouTube channel. But I don't even think most of MSNBC is still touting the garbage, the beheaded babies and crap like that. But because of all these lies, or maybe despite all these lies, I guess, more than a third of Americans believe Israel is committing genocide. This is a poll from just a couple of weeks ago. And it's a big deal because you got to understand, these are Americans that are given just a tsunami of propaganda, pro-Israel propaganda, just a tsunami of garbage comes across our airwaves. And a lot of people still trust those trash networks, dumpster fire networks. Fox News is still the most watched network in all of the United States. And MSNBC, CNN, they all agree on pro-Israel, pro-genocide standpoint. CNN staff has been protesting, some of them protesting their own corporation against this. Anyway, according to the Economist YouGov poll, roughly equal numbers of adults believe Israel's military campaign against Palestinian amounts to genocide. 35% say it is, 36% say it isn't, and 29% say, I don't know. I'm not sure. Half of those surveyed aged 18 to 29, 49% say Israel is committing genocide. And so it is sad that number is not 100%. That is a sad thing, but this is people that are so heavily propagandized to, and yet still a third of Americans, 50% of people under 29 understand this is genocide. Like, that's pretty actually amazing to have Americans breaking out of this garbage, this shit show that has been, it's a bucket, it's a helmet actually of shit show that has just been, it's filled with just turds, and we put it on our heads, and that's what you see as your reality. It's like they live with the glasses, except the reverse. The glasses are the garbage. Anyway, so the fact that a third of Americans see through this is amazing. Okay, let's get to how some more about it. What exactly Israel's doing here, and some updates on the horror show that it is. Like I said, I'm also going to be bringing you a story about how the U.S. is actually making the missiles that Russia is using in their battle, which is hilarious in multiple levels in their battle with Ukraine, considering the U.S. creates a proxy war, then arms both sides. So we'll be getting to that story coming up in a few minutes, as well as much more. But please take a second to donate if you see fit in the super chats, and I will address every statement that if it's, I'd say $4 or $5, I'll address it if I have time. I might not address it when you post it, but I'll get to it at some point. Thank you. And 11th hour. All of my students have shown me there is greatness in all of you, yet most people act like trash. Such a waste of creativity. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. People, individual humans are wonderful. Groups of people can be very scary. So Israel continues to kill doctors and medics. Israel's military kills Dr. Taha al-Shanti, the general director of private medicine at the Palestinian Ministry of Health, along with his entire family in Gaza. That is a recent murder of a head doctor, which is what it's what Israel's been doing. They are targeting these people. These are not accidents. And Israel knows these are not Hamas. Israel knows these are not Hamas fighters. This post, and I know a lot of people were talking about him. This says, did you forget him? Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, director of Al-Shifa Hospital, the doctor who rejected the occupation's threats to evacuate Al-Shifa Hospital despite the siege and bombing. So basically, they'll often drop leaflets or give phone calls saying, we're about to bomb your hospital, we're about to bomb your house, whatever. And they apparently did that with this hospital, and this director of the hospital refused to leave and refused to abandon his patients. He remained attached to the sick and wounded because obviously many patients in the hospital cannot leave. They don't have that option. They're not able to, at least not quickly. The doctor was arrested then by the Israeli occupation on November 23rd, and there's no information or news about him. And all of these are war crimes, if you need reminding of that. I think most of you know that. Israel has also continued to go after, thank you, bruh, for the donation. People have also continued to go after, people. Israel has continued to go after, I sound like the mainstream media where they just use passive voice and don't tell you who did it. Bombing kills 5 children in Gaza. I wonder who did it. Maybe it was like just a weird dude in the neighborhood or what. Anyway. Israel just killed another Palestinian journalist in Gaza today, Yasser Mamdouh. Yasser becomes the 129th journalist murdered in Gaza by Israel since October 7th. And I looked up the numbers. 129 journalists is, let's see, where is it? That is over double the number of journalists killed in the entire 20 years of the Vietnam War. 63 journalists were killed in the Vietnam War. Also, it is double the number of journalists killed in the entirety of World War II. 67 journalists killed in 7 years in World War II. And there's an easy explanation as to why this is. It's not that Gaza is so packed with journalists that they just happen to get hit more. It is that Israel is aiming for journalists. They know where they are. They know where they live. This is one of the most surveilled places on earth. And Israel specifically is killing journalists. That is what they're going after. But I also wanted to remind you that it's not just Gaza. Israel has been committing a horror show and atrocities and war crimes in the West Bank as well. Not nearly the number of killing in the West Bank, the number of dead in the West Bank, but they have been arresting an endless stream of people for doing nothing. And here is video that the IDF proudly posted of them in an empty Palestinian shop. They probably already arrested the people in it. Palestinian shop in the West Bank, destroying the shop with baseball bats, fire extinguisher. And they posted this proudly. This is them excited that they're destroying this shop. They are not covering up their war crimes. I mean, good news is maybe it should make a tribunal easier later. Lots of evidence posted online, posted on their Telegram channels. Good to see they're giving all this evidence to people later for these war crimes, but it shows how, excited they are to commit these crimes. I obviously don't bring to you the photos of, the dead, photos of dead children and things like that. It's partially because I can't handle it. I shut down. I know some people find that it can grab people's attention and get them more likely to care about this genocide, about this horror show, about how horrific it is. So I don't begrudge people saying this is what you need to see. But for me, and I think for some of you, it just causes me like my brain can't even process it. And I don't do more work on this issue. I do less if I have to look at that stuff. So that would be why I personally choose not to to air that stuff. But people are standing up. Here's, I'm mixing hope in with all this horror show. A third of Americans know this is genocide, and 65% want a ceasefire. This is, and I'm sorry, it's a skinny video, but this is millions rallying in Yemen to affirm support for Palestine and their readiness for major war to defend Palestine. And it's, again, I'm sorry, the video is so small, but it is millions of people. Like, I have never seen a protest anywhere, anything like that ever in the United States. Millions of people there to support Palestine. And this is after, obviously, that the U.S. has essentially declared war on Yemen. The U.S. doesn't really declare war anymore. We just go to war. We just bomb people. There used to be a declaration of war. It used to be up to Congress to actually approve war and to approve weapon shipments. But not only is there no declaration of war anymore since World War II or whenever, but on top of that, Congress, the shipments, the tens of thousands of munitions that have been sent to Israel to facilitate this genocide, the Biden administration has gone around Congress for that. They just keep it secret and ship guns and missiles and whatever else to Israel. Anyway, speaking of Yemen, this is from a few days ago, and this woman, did I lose her name? Let's see. Yeah, I don't have her name. Sorry. But anyway, she's an English journalist and British journalist, and she did an amazing job of just destroying these hosts on Sky News when they asked about the Houthis bombing ships that were headed to Israel, right? You guys have heard about that. And that is probably one of the most effective pushbacks against this genocide we've seen, is threatening the economy, threatening Israel's economy. So anyway, watch this clip.
Well, day out.
By the way,
I'm sorry, your Amazon packages.
Oh man, wrong spot. Sorry.
That hundreds of billions of dollars has been put at risk because the Houthis have held this area in the Red Sea at ransom.
Sorry, so just let me get this straight, Yalda. So we are bombing one of the poorest countries in the world that has been under a humanitarian blockade. There has been famine. These people have been decimated, and we are bombing them because a couple of guys in dinghies in support for the Palestinians who are having a genocide committed against them. They're objecting to that, and we're bombing them. Come on now. I mean, this is just an insane world for us to even think. I'm so sorry your Amazon packages are delayed. I really am. Like, I wish mine came on time. But, genocide, guys, genocide. There are 2 mothers a day dying in Gaza right now. It's 109 days into a conflict in which a humanitarian crisis has been declared to the world day out.
By the way.
Amazing. She just destroys them. Yeah, sorry, her name was on the screen. Didn't realize that. Miriam Francois. But she just destroys them because and that is by the way, the anchor there, that's the standard talking points of US and British media. Like, that's not an unusual stance to have. It was like, these horrible Houthis are damn, and it's like, you're committing genocide. This is a US-backed genocide, US and UK backed. The US is sending far more support, but US and UK backed genocide. And you're furious that someone dare slightly with pinprick attacks fight back, make it a little more difficult for shit to get through the channels. I mean, it really is a horror show that they're trying to defend. And she did a great job of breaking them down, acting. I mean, it really is a reverse moral world. They've reversed the morality of, like, you're supposed to be horrified that someone would try and stop this genocide. It's unbelievable. And anyway, she did a great job of tearing that apart. I wanted to show you this, another damn thin video, but these videos need to stop losing weight. But This is the State Department spokesperson, and he's the assistant, he's the deputy spokesperson, and he's so god awful at his job. Like, he's not even good lying. Where it's really kind of sad. You almost feel for him. It's like an MMA fight where the guy's just getting beaten and pummeled endlessly, and you're like, are they ever going to stop this? That's what this feels like. Anyway, he is just cornered on the topic of what the U.S. designates Palestinians. Because if you're not going to designate them as their own country, which the U.S. clearly does not, and also they'd have all kinds of rights they don't have if it was their country, if it was designated a country. But if you're not going to designate a country, then what do you designate? And you're not going to designate them an occupied people. Then what are you calling them? What are they? And anyway, he does a great job.
Kind of designation you give the Palestinians in the West Bank.
That they reside in those territories.
They reside in that totally independent of the rest of the world, as if it were a different planet. Are they occupied, for instance? Do you subscribe to the fact that they are under military occupation?
Said,
It's a simple question. Are they under occupation?
Said, let me say a couple of things to the point that I believe.
Are they occupied or are they not occupied? What is the status that you give the Palestinians right at this moment? What kind of status do they have?
Said, the recent period has seen a sharp.
I'm not talking about a recent period. I am saying about legally. How do you designate the Palestinians in the West Bank? What is their status?
Said, I understand the question you're asking, and as we've said previously, it is vital for both sides to take action to prevent even greater loss, and we condemn any violence, escalation, or provocation.
He's got nothing. He's got absolutely no answer to what are the Palestinians. Like, define them. Are they an occupied people? Because if so, the UN says legally they have the right to armed resistance if they're an occupied people. That's even the UN says that. If they're not an occupied people, then are they a country? Because if they're a country, then they have a bunch of rights as a country. For one, they have the right to freely come and go. The UN says if anybody has a right to freely come and go from their country. They also have a right to a military. So clearly that's not the case. So if they're not occupied and they're not a country, what are you calling them? What is it? And instead, the asshole there, he says the phrases that they're clearly told to say to buy time. One is they go, I understand your question, which is not even the beginning of an answer. I understand your question. The other is they go, and as I've said repeatedly. And so they say those sentences to try and give them time to think, but he gets to the end of those meaningless phrases. And, I'm surprised he didn't throw in some more, well, as I've said repeatedly, I understand your question. And I think we can all agree that I understand your question. And when your question comes up, as it just did, I would like to say here, as I've said before, and if you'll let me speak, as I've said before, so you're not letting me answer. As I've said before, I understand your question. Next question. I'm surprised he didn't do more, but it is it's tremendous how bad he is at the propaganda. I mean, you got to get better at propaganda. If you grow up as a young little kid, when he was little, and he said, I want to be the propaganda guy for the U.S. empire while we bomb children. Like, that's great. He got to live his dream. I'm very excited about that. Good for you, living your dream. Way to go, buddy. Way to get out there and live your dream of endorsing and promoting and manufacturing consent for murdering children. That's beautiful, but you got to get good at it. And it's really practice, okay? It's practice makes perfect. So if you're not going to practice, if you're not going to put in your all, if you're not going to put in those hours in the off season of practicing how to get people to endorse genocide, then what are we doing here? Well, I don't feel like you really want to go pro. I'm just saying. Okay, folks. Thank you for everybody being here. Click thumbs up. I got more coming up, as well as an admission from the UNWA, the head of UNWA, the UN agency that Israel. Sorry, God, could I trip on one more word? That Israel is trying to destroy right now. An admission from them about the staff they've been firing. I also have that story coming up on the U.S. is making Russia's missiles. all of that's coming up and much more. Maybe we're getting to something, an interesting statement by a Weiwei as well. All of that's coming up. Please hit thumbs up. Please hit subscribe. Please hit share. All those good things. If you're on YouTube or Rumble, hit subscribe or follow, and then click the bell icon. If you're on YouTube, you got to click all, because otherwise you won't get the notification. Also, you probably won't get the notification anyway, so please just show up. I do these 4 days a week: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Also have government secrets on Wednesdays. But Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I do these, and you can just show up. Don't wait for YouTube to tell you about it. Just be here. Just come and enjoy the show. And also today I am, and maybe I'll be doing it more, I am addressing any comments there in the super chats that for $5 or above, I'll be addressing or reading any of those comments. As long as they're not, as long as they don't have too many dildo emojis. If they if there's like over under, if it's over 3 eggplants, I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna address it. Okay, but let's see, a couple more stories on Israel. I mean, it is genocide, so why not focus on that? So Israel is also cracking down on dissent within Israel. You really are not allowed to speak out very much at all in Israel, which is hilarious, because one of the things they tout, the U.S. and Israel touts about Israel, is, oh, we're the free country in the Middle East, right? You have freedom of speech, and you can do this, and you can write your newspapers and all this, and we have democracy, which they don't, because if you're an apartheid state and you have 2.2 million people in a prison and you won't let them vote, that's not democracy. So they tout all these things, but hilariously, they are continuing to crack down on any kinds of freedoms in Israel. Israel's Knesset, their parliament, approves a bill which punishes the denial or quote unquote downplaying of the Israeli narrative of October 7th by up to 5 years in prison. 5 years in prison. And by downplaying, I'm sure they mean simply revealing the truth about what happened on October 7th, which is that, yes, Hamas killed some people, but also the IDF killed a ridiculous amount of people, an insane amount of people. So it's like, basically, if you repeat the truth in Israel, you could face up to 5 years in prison. Also want to bring you this story. So you guys know that UNRWA, this massive relief agency for Palestinians, UN-based, 30,000 employees, 700 schools, 9-point-something million medical visits a year, just incredibly important to Palestinians. And Israel has been working to destroy it. So Israel created this seeming lie. I mean, so far it's been debunked. So there's been no evidence yet proving it. So Israel created this lie that 12 UNRWA employees were involved in the October 7th events, but they have not brought any proof of that. So UNRWA has now fired several employees that they were told were involved in October 7th, but they admit that there's no evidence. The head of UNRWA says the summary dismissal of 9 employees was reverse due process after Israel's claims they aided Hamas attack. Basically, Israel said, oh yeah, those guys aided Hamas, and UNRWA fired them without any evidence. So we now have an admission from the top of UNRWA that there was no evidence to actually fire these people, or that these people were involved in October 7th. So you're getting that directly from the top of the organization there. Okay, so let's get to and I might get to how the percentage of Americans who now say Biden is too old to be president. We'll see if we have time for that. But anyway, so let's get to we're switching to the UN, to the US proxy war, the Russia-Ukraine proxy war. This is actually from a pro-Ukraine propaganda rag, but I'll explain why it's important. So this is a Ukraine propaganda rag, but they're quoting, they're getting this number from the Yermak McFall expert group on Russian sanctions, the lead organization on making sure Russia sanctions actually happen, that Russia is actually sanctioned. And they reported that 81% of foreign components in Russian missiles originate in the U.S. Up to 81% of foreign components found in Russian missiles originate in the U.S. An obtained document from Yermak McFall expert group on Russian sanctions. The KH-101 cruise missile contains at least 53 types of components like microchips and microcircuits. These parts originate with companies such as ST Microelectronics in Switzerland, Vicor, the U.S., Xilinx, U.S., Intel Corporation, U.S., Texas Instruments, U.S. I remember when they did my calculator back in the day. It's good to see they're now making bombs to kill kids. Zilog, U.S., Maxim Integrated, U.S., and Cypress Semiconductor, U.S., based companies. And so the reason I wanted to highlight this was not, bad Russia or, bad Ukraine or anything like that. The reason I wanted to highlight this was because this shows the U.S. is arming both sides in one way or another. Now, the U.S. is not sending quote unquote aid packages to Russia. The U.S. is not sending completed missiles to Russia. That is true. But the components that make up these missiles in Russia, but also in Ukraine, in so many other countries, Saudi Arabia, and they're perpetrating a genocide against Yemen, in Israel, and even they say many of the arms that ISIS has are American arms, American-made weapons, or American components. It shows that the U.S. is actually arming both sides of many of these conflicts. And so the U.S. benefits, the U.S. empire benefits by endless war besides just the power it gives the U.S. government. The U.S. prefers the proxy war in Ukraine because they don't care if Ukrainians die, and hundreds of thousands have. They don't care if Ukrainians die. They don't care if Russians die, but it's also good for the economy. And here is both sides are using U.S. components as they wage war against each other. Now, this is a little less maybe direct than like in Afghanistan, where the U.S. was funding the Taliban, not completely, but was giving hundreds of millions over the years to the Taliban in various ways. They would pay the Taliban, for example, to let them through mountain pass roads without being attacked so that they could then fight the Taliban later. There's also been reports in New York Times and others from years back, not many years, showing that CIA armed and trained groups in Syria and in Afghanistan were fighting Pentagon trained and armed groups. So the U.S. is funding both sides of these wars, and that continues in the proxy war, with the proxy war in Ukraine. It continues there. So as the U.S. empire, and as our ruling elite, as the people in Congress go, they wag their finger and go, we got to fight this proxy war because Russia's bad and they're Hitler and they're going to take over Europe. And as they do that, they likely know that both sides are using components that are made by U.S. companies, and U.S. companies make a lot of money, and the U.S. military-industrial complex gives money to these companies to make these components, and then those components go to all of these countries that we end up fighting in one way or another, or end up arming or fighting or anything else. So it is all one giant circle jerk. But the thing is, it also enriches the U.S., and I mainly mean the rich in the U.S. Not many of you are weapons contractors, I don't think. If you're watching my show, you're probably not a weapons contractor. So this is a pretty major story that is going to be completely ignored by the U.S. press and the U.S. government. And if it's not ignored, here's the way it would be used. The only way it would be used is, oh my God, we need to increase sanctions on Russia. This is because the sanctions aren't enough. No, it's because your ridiculous capitalist economy puts dollar signs on everything, wants to make money from everything, and so they don't care if they arm both sides. They just want the next quarter to look good. So that is the deeper level of this reality that you won't get from a lot of your even independent media. Is this comes down to capitalism. This comes down to a market economy that has no morals, has no soul, has no allegiance to a country. The market economy is not like, I need to protect the United States. No, it's dollars over everything. The economy, the market economy don't care if everybody dies trying to get money. Market economy don't care. And so this is yet again just more proof that the U.S. is arming all sides, where the U.S. is arming and sending bombs at this side. Many of the Hamas had came from, some were American made, but many of them were Israeli. Many of them were IDF weapons that had somehow been stolen or trickled out into Hamas's hands. So U.S. and Israel arming both sides of that conflict too. I mean, it really is incredible that we can get away with the propaganda that makes people think that we aren't on both sides of most of these conflicts. Pretty incredible. So the same topic, or at least to some degree, Biden has promoted National Security Aide John Kirby, whose clips I often show, and I'm going to show you another one in a second. John Kirby, President Joe Biden's top national security spokesperson, is getting a promotion and an expanded role at the White House, a U.S. official told Reuters on Sunday. Kirby, who in past years had served as the top spokesperson at both the Pentagon and the State Department, will have a new title, White House National Security Communications Advisor. So this guy is the lunatic who, tries to sell these absolutely insane wars to the public. But here's a clip of him, and I couldn't find the date of this, but it's clearly within the last 2 years. But I think it's fairly recent. But it's him trying to justify, yet again, this is one of the spokespeople. I love when the spokespeople have no answer for the garbage they're putting out. So as you remember, the proxy war was justified by saying that Russia just attacked out of the blue, and oh my God, and how did it happen, and where did they come from, and why did they decide they needed to attack? Oh my God, it's just out of the blue. That's what we were told, right? Americans were told. But as most of you know, there's a lot of reasons for it. I won't get into all the details that Russia invaded, but one of the biggest ones was the movement of NATO. NATO was getting closer and closer and continues to get closer and closer to Russia's border. Russia had said for years, back into the 90s, maybe even before, that Ukraine joining NATO or working with NATO or NATO weapons in Ukraine was a red line for Russia, because Russia views Ukraine as part of Russia, which at a time it was, and many Ukrainians are Russian culturally and Russian speaking, etc. Even Zelensky apparently does not speak Ukrainian very well and speaks Russian fluently. What I'm told, I can't understand him, so I don't know. But anyway, so here is Kirby trying to justify the fact that NATO has moved closer and closer to Russia, and whether Russia has a point that NATO's moved closer and closer to Russia.
To look at this and say the reason that the Russian army is on NATO, the Russian army is at NATO's doorstep, is because NATO has expanded rather than the Russians expanding. That, in other words, NATO has moved closer to Russia rather than Russia moving closer to NATO. Is that not an accurate way to look at this?
I think that's the way President Putin probably looks at it. It's certainly not the way that we look at it.
I'll keep playing in a second, but what a dodge. You just go, well, I bet that what Putin would say. No, like literally you can look at the borders. It's not what Putin would say. It's just, you can look at a map. NATO's gotten bigger. Russia has not gotten bigger, right? Like, that's just a map. That's not Putin. That's just map. Just mappins talking.
You don't think that NATO has expanded eastward toward Russia?
NATO has expanded,
Okay.
and the expansion has been a good thing for.
So the reason that
So NATO has expanded, but it's been good. So you're saying it has expanded towards Russia. It's like trying to talk to like a mm, a 5-year-old who's just sniffed a lot of glue. Like you're like, but you just said the thing that you wouldn't that I asked you. You just right? It has expanded towards Russia.
The Russian army is at NATO's doorstep is not the fault of the Russian army, it's not the Russian army that's done it. It's NATO has moved closer to
I'm pretty
east.
sure it wasn't NATO who was ordering, upwards of 15 battalion tactical groups to within 10 kilometers of the border with Ukraine.
By the way, just right there, you notice how they phrase it, and I had forgotten this from when this is around the time that the Russia first entered Ukraine. Is they kept saying Russia's amassed tactical units near Ukraine. They're amassing tactical units. They're amassing troops near Ukraine border. And another way to phrase that is Russia's amassing soldiers in Russia. Like, could you imagine any other country saying the U.S. put troops somewhere in the U.S.? That's so upsetting. Hold on, the U.S. put troops in the U.S.? Shit. Oh no. The U.S. moved troops in the U.S. And of course, all of this is laughable because the U.S. has troops around the world. We have troops at 800, 900 military bases around the world. So, and meanwhile, this guy and the administration is like, Russia is in Russia.
And I'm pretty sure it wasn't NATO who put little green men inside Ukraine to destabilize eastern
I'm
states.
pretty sure that Ukraine is not a member of NATO.
I have no idea what little green men he's talking about. But also, yeah, Ukraine's not a member of NATO.
So unless that's changed,
It's not
Okay.
changed, but I'm
So,
pretty sure the movement by Russia is Russia's
if NATO is moved east, the reason that the Russian army is closer or on NATO's doorstep is because NATO moved.
NATO is not an anti-Russia alliance. NATO is a security alliance.
Unfortunately, for 50 years, it was an anti-Soviet alliance. So
Where's
do you
the
not
Soviet
understand it?
Union
Do you not understand how, or can you not even see how the Russians will perceive it as a threat? And the fact that it keeps getting closer to their border while their troops, I mean, the places where their troops are, you say their troops are, and they may have been in Ukraine and Georgia, are not NATO members.
I'm not going to pretend to know what goes in President Putin's mind or Russia.
Anyway, you get the point. This is that's the type of garbage you spit out, and you get a promotion in the Biden administration. Very, very exciting for him. Good for him, moving up the ranks. Okay, let's talk about how Biden is now. Let's see, where is it? There is a consensus, a growing consensus, and I don't mean amongst you and me. I mean amongst like the U.S. ruling elites, that includes the media, that Biden might just be too old to be president. That Biden might just be, and this is not, if you guys watch my stuff before, this is not saying Trump is a good guy. Trump is a goddamn catastrophe. Trump's a megalomaniacal maniac, and he has his own rotting brain stem. Like, his brain is not put together either. I don't think I should have to say that in order to criticize Biden, but I'll do it anyway. Biden, as we know, he doesn't know where he is. He just yesterday, 2 days ago, he said that that the president of Egypt was the president of Mexico. Before a day or two before that, he said he had a good meeting or phone call or something with the president of France, and he named the president of France from 1994 or something, who died in 96. So that's the Biden we're talking about. But even with all the propaganda that is pumped out by the U.S. media, overwhelming majority of Americans think Biden is too old for another term. Even with all the propaganda, overwhelming majority say he's too old, according to a new ABC poll. And you got to figure ABC is probably going to poll the people that would be most favorable for Biden. So it's probably larger than what they say. According to a poll conducted, 86% of Americans think Biden, 81, is too old to serve another term as president. 86%. Jesus Christ. That's almost all people. That's almost all of the people. You guys. That figure includes 59% of Americans who think both he and former President Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner, are too old. 59% of Americans say both of them are too old. And by the way, fun fact, they both are too old. And 27% who think only Biden is too old. So we're seeing that America is now saying Biden's too old. But on top of that, again, you have the mainstays of American media now accepting the fact that perhaps Biden, and I'm going to give you a theory here in a second, accepting the fact that Biden needs to step down or may be too old to continue to run for president. This is from the New York Times, of all places. Like, nothing is more pro-Biden than the New York Times. And it says, editorial board put out a post, The Challenges of an Aging President. Maureen Dowd put out a post, Mr. President ditched the stealth about health. Another one said, the question is not if Biden should step aside, it's how. Another one said, Democrats can no longer stay silent about Biden. So that is one from one of the most pro-Democrat, pro-neoliberal shit rags in the United States. And they have fully, clearly decided it's time to start letting America know that Biden should step aside and not be running for president again. And here's my theory, is the Democratic establishment realized I at first I thought that if Biden were going to step down and not run for another term, he would have done it before the primaries so they could find another candidate to be the Democratic candidate. But now I'm realizing there's a reason they're waiting till he's already won the primaries. And that's because if he had said, I'm not running for re-election before the primaries, then RFK Jr. or someone would have won the primaries pretty easily. And that's not what the DNC wants. The DNC wants to handpick who the next guy is, probably Gavin Newsom or someone, I don't know, but Gavin Newsom seems like he might be their top pick. And so they want to handpick the guy. Well, they can't handpick the guy if it's previous to the primaries. But if the primaries are over and it's too late, and then and Biden then says, I'm not running, then it's just DNC gets to just go, that's the guy. Here it is. We're deciding. So that's my theory there, is that very well may happen. But as I've told you many times, it doesn't actually really matter. The U.S. presidency is it's largely a show to get us to focus on that and not actually fight about things that matter more. But I'm not saying it never has any matter. It doesn't matter at all, but it matters far less than we pretend it does. Okay, I want to bring you. By the way, I'll be answering any super chats that are over $5. If anybody got any to throw in here, let me know. But I want to bring to you more about Imran Khan. I brought to you the other day that we had just kind of completed our coup against Imran Khan in Pakistan, in that he was sentenced to over 14 years in prison. This is the former prime minister who hugely popular. So Pakistan is now run by the coup government, the opposition coup government. However, they tried to make it borderline illegal for Imran Khan's party to run. There were some videos of some people in running for office on his party ticket, and they were arrested just for putting their name in to run. So clearly they tried to make it somewhat illegal. And yet still, despite all of that, ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan's PTI party and its affiliates have won the most seats in Pakistan's elections. The Election Commission has revealed as it declared final results in the hotly contested vote. So his party has won the most seats, despite the fact that there was a U.S.-backed coup against him, that he is in prison. He was also shot at one point. And clearly the people of Pakistan did not agree that was the end of Imran Khan's party. So that is pretty big news and good for them. This is not to say Imran Khan is the most left-wing human being on earth and things like that. But guess what? I'm against U.S.-backed coups pretty much no matter who it is. So, I'm not going to endorse the U.S. government destroying other people's governments. And and also the reason he was couped was because he was not going along with U.S. The U.S. proxy war against Russia. He was meeting with Putin and deciding on oil deals for Pakistan. And the U.S. very much did not like that. Okay, so let's get this. So this is kind of big news about China. So the U.S. is in a tough spot with China. I'm going over today, by the way, folks. You'll notice. Decided to do a little extra for you. If you appreciate it, throw in a super chat either on Rumble or YouTube. I decided to just give you guys a longer episode today. And like I said, I hope you appreciate it. And I hope you support this show. If you want to become a member, it's just $6 a month. It's you just go to that link tree that's on the screen there and click join the community. Or if you're at Rumble, you click the red join Lee tab. And then when you get to the join page, scroll down to become a subscriber instead of just become a free member. And that would be awesome because you would be supporting this show and making sure this show can continue. And I hugely appreciate that. So the U.S. is in a new Cold War with China, but it is very complicated in the sense the U.S. wants to try and crush China, but at the same time, China is so big and so powerful economically and is really modernizing humanity in a way that the United States is not. This does not mean I agree with everything the Chinese government does. There is clearly censorship in China, but there's censorship in the United States as well. And I'm living proof of that. Yeah, I'm not in prison. And there's an endless number of people in China, in fact, millions upon millions who criticize the government there. And guess what? They're not in prison. Okay. That's not how it works there either. But now, at times, China has arrested people, just like at times the U.S. has. There are political prisoners in the U.S. right now. And there's Julian Assange right now locked up due to the U.S. So, anyway, one of the big it was a propaganda win, but I don't mean that makes it his fault. Propaganda win for the West was and maybe continues to be, I don't know. But, well, actually, I'm going to show that maybe not. The artist Weiwei. Now, most of you have heard of Weiwei, Chinese artist. I think he does really cool work. I like it. I'm a fan, but I am no art scholar. But he's hugely promoted by the West simply because he's Chinese, and he criticizes at times the Chinese government, and that has at times gotten him arrested by the Chinese government. And I do not think they're fans of Weiwei. But the West is fans of Weiwei, and they have heavily promoted his exhibits and made sure that he's perhaps one of the only Chinese artists that you or I could name, or many people can name. So, but here he is, maybe realizing or choosing just now to comment on the fact that Western censorship is actually more concealed and poses a greater threat than Chinese censorship. Chinese artist and activist Weiwei, whose gallery delayed his show after he tweeted about the Israel-Hamas war, said recently that censorship in the West poses a greater threat due to how it operates in a more concealed, solid, and enduring manner. It was such a pity how, this is a quote, in universities, in the media, political sector, everywhere, you cannot talk about the truth. And I guess he's right there referencing Israel's genocide. He referred to the reported suspension of New York University professor Thomas Skiba, I think, for posts made on Instagram about the Israel-Hamas war, genocide. Weiwei also discussed the cancellation of an exhibition of his work at Lisson Gallery last year after posting a tweet about the Israel-Hamas war in Mandarin. So he has been censored by the Western world for tweeting about Israel's genocide, and it's a pretty light tweet too. I think this was the tweet. The sense of guilt around the persecution of the Jewish people has been at times transferred to offset the Arab world. Anyway, he didn't use the word genocide. I'll tell you that much. But this is what many people have said about, oh, yes, there is censorship in China, but there's censorship in the US as well. And for anybody who doesn't know, I've had my TV show sanctioned into oblivion. I lost my main YouTube channel, was banned around the world. I've lost my podcast on Spotify, was banned permanently. It's back up under the name The Lee Camp Show. My TikTok was banned permanently recently. And most of my other stuff is heavily suppressed. Now, thank you guys so much for watching right now and helping my show to grow despite all of the censorship, despite all of the suppression. But the idea that we don't have censorship in the US or in the West is laughable. And it is aggressive, but it is done in a more sneaky, more nefarious way. Here in the West, people think they have freedom of speech, as we see Julian Assange tortured in prison, as we see Mumia Abu-Jamal has been on death row for years and years, having been framed. He was a journalist before he was framed for a murder. Having seen other people who speak the truth, whether it be Chelsea Manning or John Kiriakou, put into prison for revealing the truth. And many of us, like myself, are not arrested. We're just censored. And so here you have one of the biggest propaganda tools, and I don't think that was his doing, but propaganda tools of the West, Chinese artist Weiwei, saying that that Western censorship is more concealed and poses a greater threat than Chinese censorship. I think I was reading a Caitlin Johnstone article, and she referenced some, I guess this is a well-known joke about this from back during the Soviet Union days, about a Russian guy on a plane flying to America. He's sitting next to an American, and he says, what brings you to the U.S.? And he says, oh, I want to learn about American propaganda. And the American says, what propaganda? And the Russian says, exactly. Meaning, we Americans don't even seem to know we're being propagandized to, which is pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. They've succeeded at doing that to us, at making us think that we don't face propaganda. Okay, let's see if I have one more for you before I wrap up. Can't thank you guys enough for being here, for sharing, and for letting people know. Like I said, you can just show up rather than wait for the alerts, because lots of times you won't get them, especially from YouTube. But I do truly appreciate it. And let's go. Speaking of censorship, I'll cap, since it's a good segue, I'll cap off on this censorship. Facebook and Instagram have just deleted the accounts of Iran's supreme leader, which Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, I guess, has supported Hamas's attack, and they have used that as a reason to delete his account. But I said this long ago. This is way before they started heavily censoring these platforms. I had said that back, years ago on Twitter and things. I said the fact that Twitter and these other places are becoming the kind of the town square, the global town square, is dangerous, that the U.S. runs and owns them all. Now there are some Chinese ones, but largely runs and owns the biggest ones. The fact the U.S. runs and owns them is dangerous, because the moment the U.S. decides to go after one of these countries, such as Iran, they can just get these massive accounts banned so that these countries are not able to communicate with their people, which is something that many people have come to rely on. And sure enough, we've seen exactly that. I mean, not just, the leader of Iran was banned, but in most cases, and my YouTube was banned, hell, but in most cases, they just heavily suppress things. So you'll notice like RT or many of these other accounts, even something like Mint Press, the news outlet that I used to work for last year. Mint Press has been heavily like even more suppressed than me. Like Mint Press put something up and it gets like one view because they are giving the They are talking about Palestinian issues, and that got them really suppressed. But even for countries, like, it's not like the Russian ambassador can tweet something and have it seen by anyone, or even countries that are not technically, even in any kind of battle with the U.S. I mean, Russia's in a proxy war with us, but Venezuela, like, you can't have a Venezuelan ambassador tweet at something and have it be seen by anyone. So this suppression and censorship by the U.S. government is massive, and yeah, and someone's pointing out that Lewis is pointing out that TikTok is Chinese. That's true. It was initially, but the U.S. has, I believe, put the American version under American ownership. But I think that went through. I know there were congressional hearings, but on top of that, whether it is or not it may still be run by a Singaporean. But either way, TikTok is doing the U.S. government's bidding. Basically, the reason I was banned by TikTok was because, they didn't tell me this. I just now know, because they were heavily cracking down on anyone who was speaking truth about Gaza, speaking about the genocide in Gaza. And they were basically told that they were told, stop letting Gaza Palestinian perspectives and perspectives makes it sound like, oh, it's just two sides. No, it's the truth. It's the truth. The Palestinian perspective is the truth. But yeah, that's why they went after me. That's why they banned me. Anyway, stay blessed. Thank you for the donation. Says Lee, if at all possible, if all possibilities, sorry, I can't read. If all possibilities exist simultaneously, how can we jump to there where we realize peace and protect the children? So how can we jump? Sorry, not sure I quite understand this. You're saying if we are in a multiverse. Okay, so if we're in the multiverse, wow, stay blessed. I was not in the frame of mind to address the multiverse at the moment. So this is you threw me here. But okay, let me get into my multiverse head. If there's a multiverse with all possibilities, how do we jump to the one where Joe Biden and Donald Trump were never born, and there's peace and prosperity and children protected? Thank you for asking. Thank you for the question. It's a little complicated. You tap the heels of your shoes together while you have them tied together, and you say, better multiverse, and you snap your fingers at the same time, and then it should do it. But you gotta kind of time it. It's gotta be like right on. And you could take, like, if the timing's not just right, it's not gonna work. So, and say goodbye to your friends and family beforehand, because you ain't coming back. It's a one-way ticket, folks. One-way ticket. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. Unless we got any other super chats, let me know. Thank you so much for supporting this show and for making it grow. We are growing, and it's thanks to you. You guys are amazing, and please show up every day at 3 p.m. Eastern. I do, on Wednesdays of the day, I skip the live stream, but I do Government Secrets at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you show up to my YouTube at 2 p.m., or anytime after, you'll get that content as well. So really, it's 5 days a week. It's just that Wednesdays is Government Secrets. So 5 days a week. I am missing this Friday, so I won't be here Friday, but I will see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Thanks. Keep fighting.